endings are a tricky thing when it comes to creative writing. It may not be the most important thing for a story, but it's the final note you're going to go out on. A perfect ending of your story will make the audience appreciate your work more, but a bad one might make them retroactively hate the earlier parts of your story. And that's sort of the predicament George Lucas found himself in after releasing Attack of the Clones. In a way, this story isn't ending it for a lot of reasons, especially in retrospect. It was the last movie George Lucas would direct for the Star Wars saga, and technically the last one he had direct control over. It was the last live-action film he made before deciding to sell the series to Disney. Many people were also convinced that this was the last Star Wars movie we'd ever get. Period. It makes sense. There was a concise story that logically would have had the information we needed completed after the sixth film was released. It makes me wonder how George Lucas felt when making this movie. Maybe some of us don't remember, but there was a major backlash to the first two prequel films, which I can admit the original trilogy has a higher bar of quality than the prequels, but the amount of hatred and literal harassment that happened when these films were released were kind of ridiculous. It's sort of crazy to think about it now because I'd say there's a lot of love for the prequels now more than ever. It's very much due to the fact that a lot of people who grew up with the prequels and loved them as a kid are now adults. A lot of them around my age. Sometimes it's an ironic, meme-based love, but it's also genuine a lot of the time. This made me more willing and even a bit excited when I decided to make this video. I really want to see the reaction to this will be. I think this is the perfect time since Revenge of the Sith is having its 20th anniversary this year. This movie has been a major foundation for so much after it. I doubt there'd be the Clone Wars, Rebels, Jedi Fallen Order, Andor, and so much more without everything this film introduced to the Star Wars story. It's not just big now, it was huge when it came out too. Just look at the massive media blitz that occurred when this movie came out. There were so many tie-in games released around the time, and a lot of them were basically classics among Star Wars fans. We got Battlefront 2, which I think is one of the best games ever made. Revenge of the Sith, the video game, which is a great Devil May Cry style action game. Republic Commando, and even Lego Star Wars. There was even a plug-and-play game. We also got the phenomenal Star Wars Clone Wars by Genndy Tartakovsky between Star Wars 2 and 3. And we got so many toys, and possibly the best LEGO Star Wars line ever produced. They even had this cool website called HoloNet News, which was meant to be an in-universe website. Can we bring these things back actually? I loved playing with these as a kid. I think you get the picture I'm trying to paint by now. The film was giant. I think I should establish my personal connection with this movie before I start getting into the nitty-gritty. This was the first Star Wars movie I ever watched. I didn't finish it. I can't exactly remember what happened, but I was so young. I think I was about 3 years old. When my family noticed that I was enjoying the parts of the movie I was watching, they made sure that I was able to watch all the movies I could, and also in release order, because in my opinion, that's still the best way to watch it. My uncle gave me his theatrical versions of the original trilogy on VHS to watch, and I still have them to this day. But I watched them so much that the tapes barely function now. Don't worry, I bought new physical copies because physical media is the best. But eventually, I watched it all in order and I fell in love with all of it. And to this day, despite how shaky Star Wars has been under Disney's banner, I'm still a fan and I wish the best for the series. And quite frankly, I feel like the 2000s were the prime time to become a Star Wars fan. There was so much. We had all the games, books, shows, we had everything we could ever need. It all goes back to Revenge of the Sith. So this movie does mean a lot to me. It was my favorite Star Wars movie for years until I was about 12 when I realized I like The Empire Strikes Back just a little bit more. But the gap of love between Empire and Revenge of the Sith for me is very small. Part of me hopes that after this rewatch it still holds up. But before I get to my research part of the video, let me know what your personal history of Revenge of the Sith is, and maybe just Star Wars as a whole. I'd love to see it. Genuinely, I like reading all those comments. They kind of bring a nice warmth to my day. Now, let's move on to the research, so I can get a slightly better context of the movie before reviewing it. I think it's obvious that this movie was a massive undertaking. There was so much work put into this movie, basically 3 years worth of constant effort. There were so many sets, practical effects, digital effects, costumes, and so much more made for this film. In fact, George Lucas started working on this movie before Attack of the Clones was even released. He was really dead set on making sure that this film would stick the landing. Much of the filming was actually done in Sydney, Australia, mainly because it'd be easier to film there and there were major tax breaks for filming there, which was good for George because, fun fact, Almost all the Star Wars films after the first one released in 1977 were mostly funded by George's personal money. That's crazy to think about because technically speaking, that would make all the films from The Empire Strikes Back to Revenge of the Sith independent movies, but I digress. Another fun fact is that the artist took a lot of influence from the Star Wars Holiday Special when creating the look for the Wookiee homeworld Kashyyyk, which is hilarious because George Lucas has been on record saying he despises that holiday special, including supposedly claiming, and I quote, "If I had all the time in the world and a hammer, I would smash every copy of the holiday special." Now, I don't know how valid that claim is, but it's hilarious nonetheless. Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen, the actors for Obi-Wan and Anakin respectively, did a lot of training for their lightsaber duels. In fact, a lot of their battles weren't even done by stunt doubles, so most of the time when they're dueling, that's them in the flesh. It shows the level of dedication they put into this movie. Most of the movie, including all the principal photography, was done on sound stages. So many stages were built and there was still a ton of practical props, but also a lot of green screen usage and CGI elements. Lucas frequently spoke with the actors and helped direct them, instead of just sitting in Video Village behind a screen all day. In fact, he made it an effort to be physically on set when he can so he could speak to the actors and get the proper results. The voice of General Grievous was actually done by crew member Matthew Wood, who still does the voice to this day. He got the role after submitting his take anonymously under the name Alan Smithy, and to explain why he chose that name, it's a common name in film that's used if you want to remain completely anonymous. Think of it like using the name John Smith or John Doe. Lucas was actually very influenced by the Lord of the Rings trilogy when making this movie. Reportedly, the original cut of Revenge of the Sith was over 3 hours long. I think even rumored to reach 4 hours long, which is insane to think about, but it was heavily cut down to keep a good pacing. If you want more information on the making of this movie than I could ever give in this small video, I'd recommend watching the documentary The Making of Revenge of the Sith, or check out the channel Prime's Theater, who makes a lot of great long-form documentaries on a ton of stuff. Now, let's get on with the review, shall we? I think a great place to start is the actual plot of the movie, which I'm glad to say is overall solid. It doesn't drag itself out too long, it doesn't end too short. I think every scene is given the right amount of time for the audience to get a good perspective on everything that happens within the film. I'd even go as far to say that this movie is the best written movie out of the whole prequel trilogy. The amount of quotable dialogue alone is a good example of this fact alone. We've got unlimited power. This is where the fun begins. I have the high ground. Hello there. I can keep going. Bouncing off my previous point, the characters of this movie are pretty good. I'd say almost all the main characters have agency and moments in the plot. The only character that I think is a little bit shafted in this movie is Padme, mainly because she doesn't really do much in this movie outside of speaking to Anakin or other characters about her feelings or worries. It's kind of a shame because in the previous 2 movies, she had a solid amount of agency. In those previous movies, there was a lot of times she actively pushed the plot forward. Hell, she's basically the most important character in Attack of the Clones, but in this movie, she's more of a plot device for Anakin's growth. She has moments of strong character and even has some of the best moments in the movie, but I just wish that she did a bit more to show that she doesn't just let bad things happen to her throughout the whole movie. Anakin has a great character arc. Everything, for the most part, feels pretty believable and even reasonable. Though I'd say there's one little hiccup in his arc for this movie. I can buy him attacking the Jedi Temple, but he literally jumps straight from, I want to save my wife, so I'll reluctantly follow Palpatine, to, now I will literally kill children because I'm supposed to. He showed a lot of reluctance when killing Mace Windu, but when he kills the younglings, he's just stone cold. Quite frankly, it just kind of feels out of character, and if I'm being honest, I feel like this scene could have been easily cut or even just implied. Obi-Wan's great in this movie. This movie's the most Obi-Wan that has ever Obi-Wan'd I could ever say. Great quotable lines, and you really feel for him when he realizes that this is what happened. Plus, Ewan McGregor's performance has just been one of the best features of the entire prequel trilogy. Look, it's Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan. I don't need to tell you it's good, you already know it. Yoda is also phenomenal in this movie too. You could see the regret and weariness in him. You get the sense that, in some way, he blames himself for not seeing all of this sooner. And maybe he realized too that the Jedi had just gotten too dogmatic and too comfortable for their own good. There's a few moments in the movie where you could see the switch turn on in his head and he knows he has no power to change what's happening. And last, but certainly not least, is Palpatine. He's the crown jewel of this whole movie. The reason we all came to see it, really. You can tell that Ian McDiarmid was ready to just let it all out and play the most evil, campiest villain of all time. Hell, he's probably the campiest villain in all of cinema. You can just tell throughout the whole movie, he knows he's already won. It's absolute genius. He literally has one of the best scenes in all of Star Wars, the tragedy of Darth Plagueis. The way he performs this scene is just so sinister. just playing coy with Anakin's mind and emotions, but as an audience member, you know what he's really trying to say. And you also know what he wants you to hear. It's just so much subtle, implicated storytelling. It's chilling. I think this is the scene that makes Palpatine one of the best villains in all of film. Swerving in a different direction for a moment, I want to talk about the cinematography, and the visuals in general. I'd say this movie is a bit 50-50 with its visual effects. Some scenes have aged really well. They definitely nail the visual consistency of this movie. What I mean by this is that many modern movies shift drastically between their live-action scenes and their CGI scenes. Mainly that the live-action scenes will be filmed in one specific style, and then all of a sudden the style will completely change in the CGI scenes, kind of yanking you at the movie a little bit. And that's usually because they have two completely separate directors and teams working on the live shoots and the CGI scenes, and they tend not to communicate whatsoever. And here you can really tell that George was a major part of the CGI scenes and the live-action shooting. One such great example of this is the space battle in the beginning. Everything is blended well together, and cutting to the actors in their cockpits doesn't yank you out of the movie. They got a great sense of space and scale in the segment, and it sits in your mind well. Though there's also quite a few moments of the CGI that have not aged well. Specifically, it makes me think of how they use CGI sets of armor for all the clones, but then place live-action heads on the models. It is genuinely very uncanny, and I couldn't look away when I noticed it. Luckily, there's so many great shots in this movie that have just phenomenal attention to visual style. This one scene I adore where Anakin just looks at the camera with his Sith eyes. It's just so good. It's a great stylized shot to reveal to us that Anakin's evil. On another point, this might just be the best musical score in all of Star Wars. Every song has such raw, emotional impact. The music just delivers gut punch after banger after gut punch after banger. I especially love the tracks Padme's Ruminations, The Great Jedi Purge, I'm So Sorry, Battle of the Heroes. They're all just so damn good. And a lot of the songs share a similar leitmotif throughout the movie that connects a lot of the themes together. It's just masterful, musical storytelling. I think, though, I have to speak on one particular segment of this movie, the final duel between Anakin and Obi-Wan. This is easily one of the greatest duels in all of film history, the CGI and practical work just blending together perfectly, and the performances by Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen are simply otherworldly. They did so much training and choreography work to make this happen, and it shows. They developed each of their characters' dueling styles to show each character's emotions and personality through their styles of fighting. And they expertly show this in how they just match each other, but in different ways. It's Anakin's raw power versus Obi-Wan's years of skill and experience. In the end, Obi-Wan's experience is what wins. It's sort of genius how Obi-Wan wins as well. Anakin is placed in a similar position to where Obi-Wan was at the end of The Phantom Menace. Thus, Obi-Wan knows what Anakin's gonna try. He gives him a chance, but Anakin's arrogance gets in his way. And with that, Obi-Wan just leaves him to die. And that's just art. That's all I can really call it. That's just beautiful visual and thematic storytelling. Which brings me to the end of the review. After all this time, I'd say the movie still holds up. Though I wouldn't say it's held up perfectly. It does sag in a couple places. I have some mild gripes and issues with the movie and the character work and some of the CGI. But I can't say that I was disappointed either, and that's what makes me happy. This movie is super special to me. To me, this is just as much a part of Star Wars as the original trilogy. For a long time, I thought this was going to be the story we end the Star Wars saga on. Sure, we were going to get books and video games and so on, but I thought this was the last movie. And if I'm being completely honest, I was okay with that. And that's all I gotta say. Do you agree with me? Do you not? Well, let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please like, comment, subscribe, share. All those things help me a ton. With all that being said, I'll see you next time.